Yeah. Hi everyone. Good morning. Sorry, my internet connection was lost in the morning, so I couldn't able to join at the right time. I'm sorry for that. Uh, we'll wait for another 2 minutes to join. I mean, everybody to join, and we'll get started.
Yeah, hi, Kiran. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, I will be out for an hour, so I will be joining on my phone.
Oh, sure, no problem.
Okay, so I may not be actively participating, but yeah, I will be joining call on my phone.
No problem. No problem.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get started. So yesterday's class, we talked about the support project and the rules of an ABAP consultant on support level, and what exactly he does, and what are all the roles and responsibilities of an ABAP consultant in terms of the development and support. So, what are the kinds of projects we have it in SAP, and how the SAP reaches to the customer or the customer reaches to the SAP, and then what is the agreement which they made between them, and then also in the support project, what are all the key areas where the ABAP consultant involvement is there, all these things we discussed about it, like yesterday. And I told you I'll be taking you to the SAP logon and sharing the screen, and then giving the an example of what exactly our the showing the things over there. But unfortunately, what is happening is like the remote desktop connection was not been successful and the logon pad was not been successful yesterday. Let me try once again. I mean, I have the connection with me. Let me try it. I hope my screen is visible, right?
Yes, Kiran. I think so.
The problem here is actually yesterday I tried to log in, but it is not logged in. So I'll be trying it again. So let's see if it logs in. Just give me a moment. Not sure what was the issue. The remote desktop was not been getting connected. Let me just try it again. Mm. Just give me a couple of minutes. I will try to sort it out.
Sure, Kiran.
Okay, I'm very sorry. The connection was not being established yet, and the remote connection was not been working. So, so we'll continue with the theoretical session today, and by today I'll be anyway sorting this out actually. So I'll show to that vendor who gives the connection, and then I'll get sorted out. Okay. So from tomorrow onwards, from tomorrow onwards, we will be starting the practical session. Okay.
Okay, Kiran.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll just go through the theoretical sessions of like what exactly I've already mentioned that these things will be discussed at the last, right? So I'll explain you what exactly this rise of elements was today. So that you get an understanding when we get into the system, like what exactly the rise of elements. Um, One moment. So where we are right now is we just completed the log on screen and the components which are in the logon screen and the type of projects, roles and responsibilities of an ABAP consultant, what exactly technical consultants and real-time generic support project, what exactly we will be getting into it and all. And the T codes and the for the functional consultant, what is the T codes, the technical, what is the T codes, and then the data types in ABAP. So we just get into the programming basically. So we are starting the programming tomorrow mostly. So these are all the data types we discussed and the statements which we are going to write in that we discussed it. And programming rules is what we discussed yesterday, and then development, quality, production. So all these things we discussed, and the keywords, like what are the keywords which are going to start in the programming, is what we discussed. So next one, before starting into this session, actually, so I supposed to give this program, prepare this program to you in front of you to write the code inside it. But unfortunately, since the system was not available, we will be just understanding the requirement. So by tomorrow, as and when the system was open, I'll straight away write the program and make you understand over here. So ABAP program would be something like, as I mentioned, there were several T codes which I've already mentioned, right? So one of the T code, which is an important T code, is in ABAP editor, SE38. So in this ABAP editor, we will be writing our programs. So whatever the programs we are going to write, those are called as reports. So whatever the reports we are going to write it actually, so we will be writing it in the ABAP editor. And we can also write it in the ABAP workbench as well as CAT. Depends on the developer to developer. It varies actually. So mostly in SE38, we will be writing the ABAP programs over here. Okay. So, and then I've already mentioned about the package. What exactly the package does and what is the local object. I'll explain you brief in a couple of minutes about that actually. So in SE38, we will be writing the program. So tomorrow I'll be writing that program. What exactly the program and what is the actual requirement is what I'm going to explain now. We are going to deal with one of the requirement called as arithmetic operations. So arithmetic operations, as you know, in the general programming languages, we have arithmetic operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So all these things would be normally available in ABAP as well. So in our requirement for PDS is actually, so we'll take a selection screen in the sense input. So I already explained how the input will be in many different programming languages. In C, the input would be of scanf. In C++, it is CIM. In ABAP, it would be parameters. So parameters and then selection screen. So both would be there. Actually, select options would be there. So the parameters or the input screen for which the user is entering the value is called selection screen. That means user is trying to select something from the ABAP level. He's writing the program and the developer develops the program and give it to the user. So user enters some value into it. That is what is called a selection screen. So the selection screen contains the input values with which the user can enable or use that selection screen to enter the values. Based on it, he'll get the result. Okay. So we will be taking two selection parameters here. So one is a first number or second number. We will be just giving a random text to it actually. And we will be handling all the operations, arithmetic operations, which are there in the system. Addition, difference, product, division, none. So we will be taking the validations as well. Validations in the sense selection screen, as and when the user gives the value, it might not be possible that every time the user enters the right value, he might enter the wrong value with which it has to validate it. So let's take an example. If a number was entered as 1, it is okay. Number was entered as 12, it is okay. 13, 21, these are all numbers. If user enters ABC in the number value, it should not be the case actually. It should throw an error to you because you can only enter the numbers because it's an arithmetic operation program. So that kind of validations we will be handling in that particular requirement. Okay. So, and the other validations which we are trying to apply in the program is by default, the last radio button should be selected. By default, the radio buttons are the ones which are enabled in the selection screen. But radio buttons, at a time, you can only select one radio button. You can only select one radio button. How you can say you can select only one radio button? If you take any of the government sites or the any banking sites or something, radio buttons would be available over there readily. So whenever you observe, you can only select one radio button at a time. You cannot select both the radio buttons at a time. Correct. Let's take an example. Are you a male or female? In that case, are you tell me your gender. So in that gender, we have like male, female, another gender. So these three would be there. At a time, you can select only one radio button. Did you observe that any time in the real time? So that's how, even in ABAP also, in the selection screen, at a time, a radio button can be selected only one. So you cannot select multiple radio buttons at a time. So in that case, what used to happen is this radio button selection should be enabled by the developer defaultly one in the selection screen, any one in the selection screen. So addition, difference, product, division, all these are operations, right? So if we make them one as a selected, so what will happen is as and when you enter some data over there, actually it will perform that action. So that is the reason we are doing the default selection as none here. That means by default, nothing would get selected.
Hi, Kiran.
Hey, hi.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can't hear you.
Now is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, okay. Okay, no problem. So by default, only one radio button should be selected. In our case, it would be none. Because as I mentioned, like other radio buttons get selected means like the operation will be directly executed. So we don't want that to happen. So that is the reason we will be taking a radio button called as none, and we will be doing that particular activity through none. So first of all, none will be selected, and then as and when the user selects another radio button, that would be enabled actually. Okay. So second validation, what we are trying to achieve is at any point of time, user should be able to select only one radio button. That is what I mentioned. So in the real time also, whenever you get into any kind of form filling in the government websites or kind of like what I can say is banking websites or any website actually, in the radio button section, at a time you can only select one. You cannot select both actually. So that's the same case we are applying it in the selection screen as well in our program. Next, third validation, what we are going to explain. On selecting one of the radio button and click on the execute button, identify the selected radio button and perform the appropriate action. That means as and when the numbers have been entered in this particular selection screen, just take an example, 1 and 2. So one of the radio button gets selected, only that particular operation should be executed. That means when 1 and 2 were being entered into this particular enter first number, enter second number parameters, when we click on addition, only that addition activity should be performed. If they select on radio button addition, if the product was being performed, product operation should be performed, that is a violation. So we have to avoid that. That means as and when the user selects on the radio button, on a fly, the operation should be performed and give the result to the user. So that is how the program should be developed. That is what we are going to take in the third validation. Okay. And then next, both the input fields should be mandatory. Let's take an example. Why both the input fields should be mandatory? So whenever you wanted to perform any of the operation, you need two numbers, correct or not? It's a addition, subtraction, difference, product, division, anything. You need two numbers. So that means if you make one as a mandatory, then with only one actually, you cannot perform the operation. So that means you have to make both as a mandatory. We have a technique called as obligatory. That's a keyword actually. So that obligatory, we will be using it in our program and making both the numbers as a mandatory so that user enters the data into it and performs the required operation and then get the result based on the operation he selected. Okay. So this is one of the requirement we are going to handle. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, my system was not open. So that's the reason I can't able to show you this. So tomorrow, as and when I develop this program, I'll show you practically what exactly this is. So I hope this requirement is understandable to everyone. Or do you
Yes,
have any
Kiran.
questions?
No, no.
Oh, this is a simple program. Yeah. Sorry, Torki, you're saying something? Okay. Okay, this is a simple program wherein all the arithmetic operations should be understandable to you. That's what the main intention of writing this program. Starting with something like, the first program which I'm going to write, as I mentioned, is keywords. So I'll show you what are all the keywords which we have it in ABAP, and I will prepare, as I mentioned, one program with all the keywords. So as and when you refer to that program, you will be in a position to understand all the keywords which are there in the ABAP. So I'll be writing one program to show you all the keywords. That's the first program you're going to write. Second program is to handle these requirements, arithmetic operations. And as and when you get into the any other ABAP program going forward, you will be dealing with arithmetic operations as well between. So to make you understand what exactly the arithmetic operations does in the ABAP system level, so I wanted to show you this requirement to handle it. It's pretty easy if you can get into the ABAP editor and write the program and understand it right. First time it would be difficult for you to make you understand yourself actually. But as and when, as I mentioned, right? So if you practice it, actually, it becomes very easy for you to get into the programs and develop it. It's pretty easy. Then, while writing the ABAP programs in ABAP editor, I mean in the real time, there are certain events which will be handled by the developer. So what are all these events basically? So these events are the ones which are controlled by the ABAP processor in the backend. So what exactly the event does? Event will do some action in the background. So whenever we wanted to, let's take an example. If I switch on the switch on the Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi will get on. So that's an event which I'm going to operate on it actually. So if I do something on the what I can say is the Zoom, where any of the action if I perform, based on that some action will get happen. So if I click on it actually, so the grid video will get open. If I click on it, something like this will get minimized actually. So hide the thumbnails. If I make Asma unmute, so she'll get unmuted actually. So that's how, I mean, if I perform an action, so automatically the reaction will get triggered. So that is called as, these are all called as events in the generic scenario. Coming to the above, there are certain events which are given by SAP defaultly. So based on the events, what exactly developer does is, based on these events, SAP developer will write the programs. So based on these events, actually, what used to happen is program will execute in a particular process. I mean, it will follow the certain sequences and it will follow the process and executes in a way that the SAP is expecting that to. Okay. So what are all the events we have it in the ABAP program? So these are all internal events, I can say. So internal events in the sense, these might be internal to SAP, and these we can write it explicitly as well, actually. So handling will be done by the developer, and what are all the things which has to be performed based on the event will be handled by the developer. But the event triggering and all will be taken care by SAP itself. Okay. So let's take a scenario of what are all the internal events which are in SAP. First, execute. As and when the program gets developed, so you have an execute button on the top. You click on that execute button. As and when the execute button executes, there is an event which is first event which is getting triggered is initialization. That means initialization in the sense, what are all the things which you are given in the selection screen will be enabled and give it to the program. That is what is called as initialization. This initialization will be the first event which will be triggered as and when ABAP developer executes the program. Okay, this is a first event. Okay, so you can ask me, who will initialize this? Who will handle this event? Handling this event will be done by the ABAP developer, but initialization triggering will be done by the SAP system. Okay, so what are all the logic which we wanted to implement as and when the event gets triggered will be handled by the ABAP developer. But event triggering part will be taken care by the ABAP processor itself. We no need to bother about it. Okay, then at selection screen output, this is one of the event. I'll tell you briefly when it comes to the scenario, but just understand the events which are there in the report. At selection screen output will handles the screen refreshing logic. That means as and when the, if you can see the previous slide, when you want the enter first number, enter second number, two inputs were there. As and when I enter the first number, so the second number has to be disabled. As and when the second number has been entered, the first number has to be disabled. That means it will be grayed off. So in order to handle these particular operations in the selection screen, there is an event which will get triggered, what is called as selection screen output. Okay. Next, selection screen. Selection screen is an event which is given by SAP as and when the selection screen data was being entered into the system. So when you enter the first number and the second number, these numbers have to be get into the system, I mean to the program, and program should handle the logic accordingly, right? So that particular logic part will be happen when the start of selection has been entered. I mean, selection screen has been entered. That means selection screen, this is a selection screen. And after clicking on that particular, giving the values and click on the execute button, start of selection is one of the event which gets triggered. Okay. Start of selection is something which will be triggered based on the entered values of the user in the selection screen. That means as and when the user enters the first number and second number, the numbers will be getting into the program, and then the start of selection event will get triggered and the logic will be handled. Okay, so this is the logic part initialization. I mean, this is initialization where we can initialize the values, but this is the logic part handling. The first event will get triggered in the logic level actually. So that means, let's take an example. Enters into the, like user enters the data into the selection screen. Let's take an example. He has entered the sales order. He has entered the quantity of the sales order. Based on the sales order and the quantity, so it has to pull up the data from the certain tables in the SAP. So in that case, actually, what used to happen is based on the selection criteria, it gets into the program and gets the query done. And based on the query, the required data will get fetched from the tables. So that will happen based on the start of selection event. Okay. So initialization used to initialize the values at selection screen output, screen refreshing logic, and start of selection will be the logic handling part event. Okay. So these are all the internal events which are in SAP. There are many more events which are there in SAP. I'll be showing you everything over there. But as and when we get into the system and writes the initial programs, right? So we will be, more habituated with these events, and it would be very easy once you get into the program. Okay. Then this is a previous one, and one moment. So as I mentioned, there are certain events, internal events, which are there in the program, and I'm going to taking you to through another slide, wherein how the radio buttons will work in the selection scheme. As I mentioned, there are in the previous requirement, there are certain radio buttons wherein you have addition, difference, product, division, none, right? So likewise, how the radio buttons works on the selection screen. So how do you handle the radio buttons logic? Okay. So let's take an example. I have three radio buttons. Button 1, button 2, button 3. Okay. Button 1, button 2, button 3. Okay. So when button 1 has been clicked, button 1's logic has to be executed. Button 2 has been clicked, the button 2 logic has to be executed. Button 3 logic has to be executed. In that case, so first thing what we are going to do, we are making a button as a default button. That's the first thing, as I mentioned in the previous requirement. Second thing, every button will be aligned with one of the function code. That means function code is something which will be aligned with the button itself. So whenever we wanted to handle any of the buttons functionality, so the function code is something which is mandatory. So every button has its function code. So based on the function code only, we will be identifying the buttons. So which button has been clicked? Let's take an example. I've clicked button 2. So what is the identification factor for button 2? Button 2 will be a name only. B2 will be the name only. But what is the identification factors when the user has been clicked here? FC2 function code. So function code is the identified by the button in terms of the program. When you give the selection screen logic, ABAP program doesn't have the intelligence of finding out what was the button you clicked it. Based on the button code only, it will be identified. So the function code is something which will be aligned with any of the buttons in the selection screen, based on which the logic will be handled. Okay, so this is function code, which you have to remember it. It is important for each and every button. There is a function code which is aligned with it. Okay. Okay. So then when you want to apply an operation on the radio buttons, so the radio buttons will be designed in the selection screen level like this. Let's take an example. R1, R2, R3, R4, R5. There are certain radio buttons in the selection screen. When you want to apply a certain functionality of the radio buttons, basically what used to happen? So radio buttons cannot work individually. Radio buttons has to be grouped and then it has to work. Let's take an example in the real-time scenario. When you have mention your gender. So like male, female, other. So three options would be there. When you group the radio buttons, then only they will understand that which radio button has been clicked. So that means male, female, other are grouped internally. So you might not notice it because you have not written that program in the background. So, but in the selection screen level, in the ABAP program level, we will be writing that in the program. So in such cases, actually, so these radio buttons will be grouped together. Based on the grouping of the radio buttons only, we will be handling the logic in the background. So that is why these radio buttons have to be grouped together with a keyword called as radio button group. This is a radio button group. Okay. So based on this radio button group keyword, what used to happen is all the selection screen radio buttons will be grouped together and apply the logic accordingly. What used to happen if you don't group the radio button? What will happen? If you don't group the radio buttons cannot work individually. So radio buttons function code also will not work. Why they will not work actually? Okay, I'll tell you the scenario. Radio buttons have the certain function groups, right? Okay, as and when user clicks on the radio button, a certain operation has to be triggered, right? So how ABAP program identifies it? How the ABAP program identifies it? Because you are giving the button name in the selection screen itself. As and when the selection screen level user enters the data only comes into the program. Correct or not? So when the data comes into the program, actually, ABAP program should have some intelligence to identify where the user has given the data, right? Or where the user has clicked on it, right? So in such cases, which will help the ABAP program to identify the radio button has been clicked, function code. Correct or not? So in this code, in this function code, actually, in this particular context, when all the radio buttons has been clubbed and the radio button group has been enabled, so what used to happen is it will identify which radio button has been clicked in the group. So based on that only, that particular radio button will perform the action. Okay. Grouping the selection screen radio buttons is mandatory everywhere. Whenever you develop a report or a program in the going forward, you have to make sure whenever you have the radio buttons like 2 or 3, you make sure that all the radio buttons are grouped together. Then only the radio buttons logic will work effectively. Understood? If you don't group the radio buttons, the radio button logic will not work. Okay. So if you don't apply the radio button group functionality, this thing will not work. Okay. I'm telling you the real-time scenarios. How the radio button group works and all. Okay. And now you can ask me the question. Okay, you told that radio buttons should be grouped and those radio buttons functionality should be enabled, right? Okay. In which event these radio buttons grouping and all will be happen? These radio buttons grouping will happen on the event called as at selection screen. Okay. At selection screen on radio button group. By at selection screen, at selection screen is an event which will be triggered to handle the validations or to perform certain actions on the selection screen level. So that based on that scenario, at selection screen on radio button group, you have to mention based on the function code of the radio button, the appropriate action will get triggered. Okay. So I hope I'm clear on what I'm delivering it here. So if you have any questions, you can stop me and you can ask me.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. So as and when you get into the system, it would be easy to understand as well, because now the problem here is I can't show it to you practically, right? So that's a major problem here. So if I get into the system and write one radio button there, you will be coming to know how exactly the radio button works in the system level. And then as and when I group the radio button, then you will be coming to know how the radio buttons are getting grouped and certain operations are being performed on it, right? So you'll be coming to know how the radio button group has been enabled on certain level of radio buttons and how those are what I can say is performing the action in terms of the program. So you will be getting to know all these factors one by one. Okay. So I'll show you
Yeah,
this practically. That's not a problem. So first thing what we discussed today is arithmetic operations, and then the internal events. So, and the events which are handled by the requirement, and then the events with radio buttons. So all these things will be shown you practically as and when the system is ready. Okay. Next, you mentioned like there are certain radio buttons, Kiran. So do we have any other functionality like let's take an example in the real time also. I have seen many websites or something. Users may have the option of clicking number of things as well actually. Do we have anything like that in the ABAP programs as well? Yes, we have it. So let's take an
checkbox.
example. Yeah, check boxes. So yeah, in the real time, basically you don't have only radio buttons options. You have the check boxes as well. Let's take an example. It is not every time like are you mention your gender like that, right? There are certain levels where you have multiple options to check it. So in the multiple option scenario, the checkboxes will come into picture. Okay. In the real time, in selection screen, we can also enable the checkboxes. Okay. How? By using the syntax called checkbox. So I'll make you understand about this when the system enables. Okay. So the checkboxes are something when they perform the action one after the other. Okay. So you mentioned that in the previous requirement that only one particular operation can be enabled at a time, right? Then if the checkbox has been selected, how the operations can be executed sequentially or simultaneously? How do you handle it? We can handle it. We can handle it. That's not a problem. By based on the checkbox selection, as and when the user gets selected, the operation will be selected, right? We will be writing the logic based on the operations selected. That means operation selection is something which will be taken care by the ABAP program, and accordingly the logic will be built and displayed to the user. At a time, addition, product, difference, division, all the four operations can be checked. And by using the right statement, as I mentioned in the slide, the right statement will be used to give the result, right? So based on the right statement, all these selected checkboxes will be checked. And accordingly, that logic or that checkboxes code will be enabled in the program level. Accordingly, based on the right statement, will perform the operation and will display the result to the user. That's how. Okay. So exactly. So what exactly the validations will be used here? Checkbox as validation is quite different from the radio button validation. Radio button validation in the sense like you have to enable the radio button and something you have to do on the radio button side and all. But now the checkbox as validation. So the first and foremost validation we will be taking care is a input field should be defaulted with some initial values and they should be mandatory. In this requirement, we will be defaulting some values directly. That means as and when your program gets executed, 10 and 20 will be defaultly enabled. Oh, this is quite different. How the 10 and 20 will be enabled over there? That's what. Initialization. In the initialization event, as I mentioned, there is an event called as initialization. What we will be doing is we will be defaulting the values of the selection screen. Or we have an option of putting that in the parameter section itself. I'll show you both the cases. In the parameter section itself, we will be defaulting the value initially. And after that, in the initialization event, we will be defaulting the values. In both the cases, I'll show you one example. Okay. So first validation we are going to apply here is we will be defaulting the values in the selection screen. What exactly is the defaulting the values? As and when the user enters into the program and execute, the selection screen will have the default values. So then he don't need to enter the values. He just selects the operation which we supposed to perform, which is supposed to perform, and then execute the program. That's it. He'll get the result. So there is another option like this to default the values. I'll show you that as well. Okay. Next validation. Whenever any checkbox is selected, perform the operation and display result. So that means, as you mentioned, like checkboxes can be selected multiple at a time. Okay. What if the user selects only single checkbox? Oh, that also will be get executed. That's not a problem. So you have an option. I mean, in the checkboxes level, you have the privilege of selecting multiple checkboxes. That's only the case. End of the day, if the user selects one radio button, only one radio button will get executed. If the user selects two radio buttons will get selected. Two checkboxes will get selected. So like that, we will have the option in the program level only. We just have to handle it. That's it. It's simple. Okay. So that means this scenario may not be ideal to multiple checkboxes. This can be ideal to single checkbox as well. So that part we are going to handle in this particular example. Okay. Hope I'm clear. Okay. Let's get into the next slide. Okay. So you said like radio buttons is one of the option with which user can enter the values and it. There is another option which you mentioned is a checkboxes. Okay. In some cases, in some websites, you will be seeing that there will be some push buttons. What exactly the push button mean? Let's take an example. You write your email ID in the Gmail. When you click on the gmail.com, you write your email ID, and in the down you have a button called as login. Correct? So login, just like that in ABAP also we have something called as push button. Push buttons are there actually. What exactly we does with the push buttons? Push buttons also handles the logic part, just like our radio button or checkboxes. So whenever user clicks on the push buttons, an event will get triggered, right? Based on the event, the certain logics will be enabled. Okay. That can be handled by using the push buttons. Same thing, nothing changes. First number, second number, addition, clear, exit. Okay. That means first number you enter, second number you enter, addition value will get enabled automatically. If you click on the push button addition will be there in that. That means if I enter 10, if I enter 20, if you click on the button addition, The value will get stored here. Okay. If you click on the clear, what will happen on the fly? All these things will get cleared automatically. That means first number will get cleared, second number addition, all these things will get cleared. If you click on exit, what used to happen is you will be exiting completely from the selection screen level. So that means you will be go to the program directly when you click on exit. So that means push button has the functionality of handling the user validation or the user enablement. I mean, whatever the user wanted to do with the push buttons actually. So push buttons has the intelligent, and in the program level, we have to handle the push buttons logic actually. Okay. These are not completely taking away the context from the radio buttons or the checkboxes. These are all alignment with those operations only. Just that the syntax will get changed. That's only the thing. Push button syntax is something different from the checkboxes or radio buttons. That's it. Nothing else we will be making it. We are not doing it any rocket science as such. It's quite simple. Just that syntax would be there for push button. We are enabling the push button on the selection screen. As and when the user enters the value, the push button logic will get enabled and gets the desired result on the selection screen. That's it. Okay. This is one of the requirement which we are going to handle. Okay. Next. As I mentioned previously, there are two things. One is a local object and a package. Okay. Now I'm going to explain you in detail what exactly the difference between package and a local object. So yesterday I've already given a glimpse of what exactly the local object and a package. But now in the real time level, I'm going to give you a certain real case, how it comes actually in when it comes to the package and local object. Okay. Let's take an example. As I mentioned yesterday, there are development, quality, production. Three systems were there. So as and when you develop something in the development system, you will not be using that in the development system at all. You will be using that in the production system. You can ask me, Kiran, how do you say that you can use that in the production system? I already mentioned you that production system is something which will be used by the business users. So SAP is a business software wherein as and when the business has been entered into the system, they will be using all the programs or something which will be developed by the developer. Correct or not? So where they will use, they will not get into the development system and they will use. They will get into the production system because business users have access only to the production system. They some business users might have access to the quality system as well, but they doesn't need a developer system access at all. They don't need it because ultimately they will be running the business. So in the business, they will be using only the production system. Okay. Whenever a developer develops something in the development system, how the development can be transported to the next systems? How the development can be transported to the next systems? Through a package. How you can say it is a package? Package is a collection of objects. So what it does is package will club all your development objects at a time. That means it is not about only the program, right? It contains a table, it contains something else, it contains an announcement, it contains a form. Many things would be there as part of your development has been concerned. All these things should be go at a time to the development. Let's take an example. I give a real time example of how I developed an object actually. So I developed a particular tool wherein that tool what it does is it has a program, it has a certain tables, it has certain structures, it has certain forms as well in it. Okay, so all these objects at a time this tool has to handle. That means I cannot send only the program to the production system right directly. I cannot send only table or a structure or a form to the production system because production system, when the tool has been enabled and used by the user, this tool has to enable everything at a time. I mean, this tool has to access everything at a time, the program, the table structure, the table type, and then the form, everything it has to handle at a time. When I send only one particular object to the production, the tool might not work properly. Correct? So it ends up with a mixed results. So in such cases, actually, I have to club all the objects of my development and I have to send it to the respective systems. So in such cases, what used to happen? I need to create a package, and then as when the package gets created, everything will be saved in the package. So as in my case, my program, my enhancement, my table, my structure, my table type, form, everything to be clubbed and put up in the package level. So then, as and when the package gets enabled and put up all these developments or the kinds of objects into it, whenever you transfer the contents from one client to another client, that means from the development time to quality client and then quality to production, you can go with this package. You can just release the transport request behind the package. I'll tell you what is the transport request mean. Okay, so all these packages, all these package contents will be transferred to the next subsequent systems. So when you don't integrate all these objects into a package, what used to happen? Only certain objects will be transferred to the next system. So the development will not be ideal. So I mean, as and when the business user wanted to test that, actually, he cannot be able to test it properly. He might end up with some issues. Okay, so package will be that kind of importance it carries actually in the real time. Okay, what is the next step? You developed a package, and what is the next step? The package has to be transferred, right? So how it get transferred? How it get transferred to the next system? There is a certain topic called as transport management. Transport management. Through transport management, this package will get transferred. Okay, what exactly is there in the transport management? Transport management contains transport request. Okay, what exactly it contains? Transport request. So through the transport request, all your development objects will be put up in the package, right? So that package will be in line aligned with this transport request. And based on this transport request, the contents of your development, one after the other, aligned in the package, will get transported to the next subsequent systems. Okay. What is the T code for transport request? SE09. In SE09, you will get all the transport requests. Based on that, what used to happen? So based on this transport request, the contents will be clubbed in the package previously, right? So the package will be attached to this transport request, and then it will get transported to the subsequent systems. Okay. There are two questions. First question. So Kiran, will you create a transport request of your own? Yes, we do have that option, but cases to cases it might differ. As I mentioned yesterday, there are certain companies like IBM, Deloitte, and all. They will not create. They will not allow the developers to create transport request of their own. So the basis team will get create. They will create the transport request, and based on the transport request which is created with from the basis team, it will be given to the developer. And in the transport request only, he has to save all his objects. That means his package, his form, his program, his table, his structure. Every development object, whatever he developed as part of the requirement, will get saved into it. Okay. Next. Yes. So this is the transportation management. Let's take an example. You have the development which is done in the development system. And as I mentioned, that can be transferred to the transport management. Correct? This is the transport management functionality. So how the transport management works basically, transport management works through the transport requests. What exactly a transport request mean? Transport request is something which will carry your developments, which will hold your developments and move that to the subsequent systems. Okay. How it gets stored? First thing, first step. As and when you develop a program, when you save the program, it asks for a transport request whether you wanted to save it in the local object or a package. I told you package is a collection of objects. Whenever you save that program, just save that program, it will give you two options. One in the local object or the package. What exactly a local object does? Local object, whenever you save something in the local object, as I mentioned yesterday, it will not transfer to the next system. Then if you wanted to transport the contents to the next system, what I should do? You have to save it in the package. That's the only option you have. Okay, I saved it in the package. Then what is the next subsequent step? Whenever you save something in that package, the next subsequent step is to save it in the transport request. Why? The package has to be gone to the next system, right? So for that, you have to get a medium, right? So that medium is a transport request. Okay, I saved it in the package, I saved it in the transport request. Then what will happen? Next question. What will happen? Okay, you are creating the development in the development system. You saved it in the package that has attached to the transport request. Then depends on the scenario. If you wanted to test it in the quality system, you can release this transport request to the quality system. And with the quality system, as I mentioned, the data would be different from the development and quality system. With the data available in the quality system, functional people will test your development in the quality system. When everything works fine, when the unit test plan, as I mentioned yesterday, was being executed successfully, then these people will raise a request to transfer it from the quality system to the production system. In the production system, the developer or I mean the business users will use that particular program. Okay. This is the real-time scenario of the transport management concept. Okay. So you can ask me the question. So Kiran, when I get into the program in the real time, actually, so do I need to ask the package to my lead? Yes, you have to ask the package. Why would I need to ask the package? You can ask me this question as well. Why would I need to ask the package? See, you might not be aware of like whether the contents can be transferred to the next system or not, right? So in such cases, who will give you the clarity when you are new to the project actually? Only the lead or manager will give you the clarity, correct? So in such cases, actually, they will tell you. Uh, so, uh, so Kiran, you do one thing. You take this package, save your objects in that package, and as and when the package gets created, it will prompt you the TR. So you can create a TR of your own. Like that, also some people will say. Or otherwise, what they'll say, Kiran, just hold on, don't give any package as such. I will give you one TR. When as and when you save this particular thing, it will automatically saved in the TR. So because I've already created the package and I saved my developments. So when you wanted to get into your development, just save it in this tier itself. No need to create a package. Somebody tell you like this as well. Okay. There are certain cases in the real time that people might say with a different words actually. So the first word what they say is, Kiran, you can create a package of your own. Okay, that will prompt you a transport request. You can save it in the transport request and let me know which transport request you saved your package. That's the first thing. Second thing is when you are doing a program and the package was already created in the backend, they will tell you that Kiran, don't create a package because for our developments we already created a package. Then what you do is actually you take this transport request. The transport request can be like this: EC3K A09B, like this. A transport request will be given from your leader and manager. Kiran, take this transport request, save your developments in this transport request directly. You no need to create a package. Okay. Hope I'm clear on this transport management concept.
Yeah, Kiran.
Okay. So you have to understand in such a way that there is only, there is nothing like a generic scenario here. The scenario might different from the company to company or kind of like project to project. There are certain projects like one of my colleague was been working in a Wipro for a Dutch bank, Deutsche Bank actually. So their scenario is completely different. What they does is actually they will not create any packages, any tiers as such. Okay, so TRs and packages will be created by the developer, but end of the day, TR will be created by basis team only. So basis team only creates the TR, and they will share the TR details to the lead or a manager. So manager will allocate what are all the TRs which are available in the system, and he will drop an email to the individual consultants that, okay, Kiran, use this TR, Asma, use this TR. So Dwarka, you use this TR, like that. They will drop an email. So scenario to scenario, project to project, it may varies. So to make you understand each and every scenario, I'm giving the real-time examples actually. Okay. So certain cases like what they will do, they will don't ask you to create any TR because we in some cases I can say like we don't have access to SC09 at all. Transport request system we don't have access at all. In such cases, how do you save the developments? This is the real-time case. Wipro, as I told you in the Dutch bank, what the project does is they will create the TR from the basis people, and that TRs will be shared individually to the consultants. So consultants will take the TR transport request, and then they will save the objects in the respective transport request for which they shared. Okay. So you have to understand all these contexts. It's not about one generic context which I can specify here. You have to understand all these contexts. Then once you get into the real time, so what used to happen is you will be knowing all these contexts. So you don't have any option at all. Like you don't have any problem at all. You can directly go to your lead. So you can ask him like, if Kiran is your lead, you can ask Kiran, Kiran, do we need to create a package or do we have ready-made TRs here? Then he'll say like, no problem, Asma, you can create a new TR. In such cases, you can create a new TR. Or if there is any restriction in the project level that you don't have to create a TRs, don't get into the transport request and create a TR. It is very much important actually. So because in some projects it would be very serious actually to create a TR because creating a TR is an expensive task in the real time. So you cannot play with the TRs just like that. You can create a program and you can save it in the local object. That doesn't matter at all for any of the person in the development system. But when you create a TR in the development system, it's an expensive task. So you should not play with the TRs is what I'm going to explain you. Okay. So don't create the TR in the development system directly. You can ask your lead or a manager how the transport management works in the project level. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Dwarka, you're asking something? If you can't able to talk, you can put it in the chat as well. I'll read the chat and I'll answer you, Dwarka, if you have any questions. Okay. Okay, since you are not in the real time Asma, so I'll give you a real time example. So it's not now actually, it's 11 years back story. So one of my old friend was working in IBM Pune. So for one of the project called as Rockline International. So Rockline is a company wherein like they have many entities in that project. So in one of the entity, he was being assigned to as a developer. So what he does is actually in the practice systems, basically what used to do. Trainer, what they will do is they'll create a package and save the object in the package and save it in the local object. Some trainers will do. So what he adapted to it is actually to save it in the local object. What he does is he just created a program and saved it in the local object. So then his manager has asked him, like, what exactly you developed it? He said, like, this is a program. And while doing the code review, he identified that the program has saved it in the local object. Then he asked my friend, actually, what you did it? I saved it in the local object. Then he asked the question, if you save it in the local object, how would it get to transfer to the next system? Then he don't have answer it, because in the training systems what the trainer does is he just told him to save it in the local object. He went with the flow because all the developments he saved it in the local object only. He didn't give the importance of package in the real time, the trainer. So what this fellow does, this fellow just created in the local object. Then it created a scene. He has given the explanation why he has done it in the local object. Then he took entire program, copied the entire program to the new program, and it saved it in the package level. Even that case also, the package was not developed by him. That package was requested by his lead, and his lead has created, and he saved it in the TR, which has already shared by the base system. He has got an email that the TR has to be taken, but his trainer has not mentioned him that the TR would be there like this, right? As I mentioned the scenarios. So this fellow directly went and created it in the local object. And after that, his manager has showed is an email actually. So there is an email which has already triggered to you to create a request, a transport request to us, right? So to save your object in it. Why did you create a local object here is what his question. So this fellow doesn't have answer at all. So that is the reason in my trainings, I used to teach everything which is happening in the real time. So that as and when you get into the real time, you will not be in a position that what needs to be done from your side. You will have clear understanding that you have all the options in the mind. As and when you get into the real time, actually, what used to happen is you can go to your a lead or a manager and you just mention these points. Like, do I need to create a new TR? Do I have any package to save my object in it? Or can I create a new package? Can I create a new TR? All these questions can be put up in front of them. So as and when you put these questions in front of them, they will be in a position to understand, though this person is expecting the clarity from us. So then it would be really good actually. It will be really nice from their side as well actually. So to tell you like, okay, don't save any packages as such. I'll give you a package to you. So you save all the contents in that package only is what they mentioned. So based on that, you can do it. Okay. So these are all the cases which are happening in the real time, and you should be knowing it already. I mean, the only thing is every trainer will not teach you all these things. Actually, the problem here is they might not face the real time scenarios, and they might not have the real time cases in their mind. They'll just give you a glimpse of creating the local budget, creating the package. You can content the transfer the contents like this, just like that, and all. But I will be teaching in a way that even though you show some experience and go inside, actually you will be a position to ask whatever you wanted to ask in the real time level. Okay. Okay. So the next thing is why I'm stressing this much in the transportation management. So transportation management is a pretty much important topic. You believe it me or not, when you get into the real time, you will see the importance of transportation management. How Kiran has stressed this much in the transportation management and explained the TR scenario, package scenario. As and when you get into the real time, you will be realizing it actually. Okay. Okay, so I hope the transportation management is clear to you guys. And do you have any questions in it? Any questions from your side? If there are no questions, I'll move forward.
No questions, Kiran.
Cool. So then, as you mentioned, like as I mentioned, yeah. So as I mentioned that transportation request. Okay. So the transportation request, how it would be enabled and how we can see the transportation request. As I mentioned, there is a T code called as SC09 where you can transport the request. Now I'll show you in the real time how the transport request will be there. So this is one of the request. So this is a workbench request. There are certain requests which are there in the real time, which is called as workbench request, customizing request, transport of copies like that. Okay. So I'll mention everything like that. So these are all the requests. Fine. So now I'm going to explain you what exactly the individual request does. Workbench request. Basically, whenever you develop some program or a table or a structure, anything in the ABAP level, you save it in the workbench request. For ABAP developers, the first and foremost point which you have to remember is workbench request will be the basics or default request which we are going to store our objects. Okay, workbench request. Almost 95% of the cases, ABAP developer save his object in workbench request only. Okay, so workbench request is something which you have to keep it in mind. We will be developing all our objects in the workbench request only. Okay. Next, customizing request. Customizing request, sometimes ABAP developer gets into it, but most of the times functional people have the option of creating the customizing request. Okay. You can ask me this question. Kiran, you were saying functional people will create a request. What is the need for functional people to create a request? They are not developing any programs, right? Then how do they create a request actually? How this customizing request will be there for them? Yes. Customizing request is something which will be done through the configuration. Okay. As I mentioned, functional people does the configurations, right? What exactly the configuration means? They will be creating some materials. They will be creating some master data, transaction data, lot of things they will be doing it in the real time in the system level. So as and when they do something and click on save, a request will be opened that is called as customizing request. So the customizing request is something which functional people take care of it. That means 95% of the cases, customizing request will be handled by the functional people. Okay. What exactly that 5% you mentioned, Kiran? You mentioned like the other 5% in the workbench request. Here also workbench request. So workbench request almost like not 95%, 100% will be the developers only. People, functional people might not be, using that workbench request. There are certain cases which they can create a workbench request, but that is also a very rare case. But customizing request, as I mentioned, 95% will be the functional consultant job. And what about the 5%? You can ask me, like, Kiran, what about that 5% of ABAP developers who creates a customizing request? Example, there are certain configurations in the SPRO wherein we will enable certain gateway channels. In the OData level, there are some gateway channels or some customizing requests wherein there are some technicalities also gets involved. So in such cases, we will also deals with the customizing request. ABAP developer also sometimes use the customizing request. Okay. In such cases, customizing request will be there for ABAP developer also. He'll create a customizing request along with this workbench request. Two requests are individual entities. Those two are not interlinked to each other. As and when they develop something, it will go to the workbench request. As and when they do the configuration, it will go to the customizing request. Okay. Next, transport of copies. What exactly is a transport of copies? I'll give you a real-time scenario. There is a project called as Deutsche Bank project, wherein three developers are involved in it. So Asma is one developer, Dwarka is second developer, Kiran is a third developer. So Asma developed tables, structures, table types, every data dictionary objects. She developed it, and Dwarka has developed a form, Adobe form, and he developed it everything back based on that Adobe form. A program has been developed by Dwarka, and everything was developed by him. And Kiran was the other developer. What he does is actually he developed a program and it gives some selection screen and some program he's developed. And along with that, Kiran developed one enhancement as well. Okay. Now they have certain individual TRs which they developed of their own bench request. They developed it. They had it already, and the TRs have to be moved one after the other. But the package contents are huge. I mean, the package contains many things. So all these contents has to be transferred at a time to the next system. At a time to the next system. Okay. So Asma developed her objects and saved it in the same package. Dwarka has developed and saved their objects in the same package. Kiran developed and saved it in the same package. So on top of that package, I need to create a request so that every TR which are handled within this package has to be clubbed and transferred. Okay, I'm repeating the same thing again. What are all the developments which Asma developed, Dwarka developed, Kiran developed? All these contents are there in only one package. That is the cust_pack. I just gave one example. This cust_pack package. So these package contents has to be developed irrespective of the TRs developed by handled by Asma, Dwarka, and Kiran. That means all the package contents has to be transported to the next system. So in such case, though the TRs are different, transport requests are different, from the individual developers. When the content has to be migrated combinedly, in such cases, we'll go with the transport of copies. I'll bet you no other trainer will teach you about the transport of copies. Certainly. Why? Because transport of copies will be a rare case where other trainers can't be able to get into that in the real time. Nobody does it actually. Since I did this transport of copies, I used to teach my students about this transport of copies. There are certain scenarios you have to get into the system and create a transport of copies based on your package, and you need to transport. So this particular topic also you should be aware of, transport of copies. This might not be pretty much important in the real time, I can say. I mean, not all the cases you can be doing it, but in certain cases, you might get the requirement of handling the transport of copies scenarios as well. So in such cases, this particular topic might be useful for you. That is the reason I'm telling you this transport of copies. Okay. I hope these three are clear for you guys, or any questions from your side?
Clear, Kiran.
Cool. Now, how the transport request looks like in the real time. See, this is the system. This system has a client. As I mentioned, 100 is a client which I showed you, right? Like that, this system has 800 client. This is a workbench request, and this is a system name, and this is a transport request. So this is a transport request. As and when the transport request creates, certain developers can create a task. Okay. That means inside a transport request, there is something called as task, which resides in the transport request. Okay. Let's take an example. Transport request created by your lead. So Kiran is your lead. He created a transport request. There are two developers which are under him. One is Asma and the other is Dwarka. So you need to create your developments as well. In such cases, what I do is I'll ask Dwarka to use this package, z_package. This package I'll ask him to use. So as and when he uses this package, it will not create another transport request. It will create a task inside the transport request. Okay, it will create a task inside the transport request. So these tasks will be individual to the developers. As an Asma enter into this project and she want to create her development. So in such cases also, it will not create another workbench request. It will create a task in the same transport request, because you have given the transport request which is provided by Kiran, right? So in such cases, as and when you entered that package or the transport request, automatically a new task will get created in the system. Okay. When you want to release it, first thing what you have to do is you need to release this task, you need to release this transport request. That's how it is. You cannot release the transport request directly. You need to release this task and then you need to release this transport request. How the transport request and task will be released? Click on this transport request, click on this task, and click on the truck button. There is a truck button which is appearing here, right? So this will release to the next system. Click on this, click on this. That's it. So all the tasks would get released by Dwarka and Asma, and then Kiran will check this particular request and then will release the transport request. That's how the package contents or the transport request contents will be transferred to the next systems. Okay. Hope I'm clear to everyone. Okay, I'll stop for now. And by tomorrow, as I mentioned, like I'll solve the issues of my system, and we'll start directly with the programming. Okay. So as I mentioned, the training will be more on the programming section, less from the theoretical section. But unfortunately, since the system was not available, I can't able to show you all these things. So first and foremost thing, what we are going to do tomorrow is the keywords program, and then the real-time requirement of the selection program, and then subsequently, so the radio buttons program, checkboxes program, will finish it off. Okay. So push buttons, all these things will be finished at a time. Okay. And I will also create the transport request and also package local object. Everything would be, ready by tomorrow. Okay. Everything I'll cover by tomorrow. So by tomorrow, what I'll do is I'll get the system ready, and based on as and when the system gets ready, we'll directly jump into the system, and I'll show you, as I mentioned, right, the application toolbar, the menu bar, and all I'll show you, right. Practically, I'll show you in the system level for first 5 minutes, and then we'll get into the system and we'll create our first program. Okay.
Okay, Kiran.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope the content is much clear to you. And I request you to go through the recording if you have any doubts in sometime. And if you have any doubts and all, you note it down. And tomorrow, as and when we get into the class, for the first 5 minutes, you can ask me the questions over here.
Oh, fine.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiran.
Bye.